going to start with the roll call. Chair McCarty. Member Fernandez Sketch.
Here.
Member Tweed.
Here.
Member Sue.
Here.
Member Shaw. Member Zareba.
I am here.
We have a quorum, and we understand that the chairman's not here today, but has agreed to serve as acting chairman. Can we get a vote to agree that?
So moved.
And second.
Thank you.
Offered sale. Vote on.
Excellent. So the first order of business, now that we have a quorum, is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Any comments or questions about the diffs?
Okay.
So could we move for approval?
So choose.
All right. Do you all in favor, or is that?
Holds, right?
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? That.
All right. Thank you. Then next we have the next agenda item, which is a presentation by Albert Klamer.
I believe, at least that's what it says in my notes, is to approve the program management consultant to assist with meter and transmitter upgrades.
Well, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
So this is Albert's group runs the Customer Service Bureau at DEP and oversees the billing operation. And as you know, the city's preferred approach for custom billing is meter billing. In order to bill customers on a meter basis, it needs to be a working water meter, working transmitter, and the property so that the properties can be properly billed based on actual water consumption. Albert's team is not taking that as what sounds like a modest construction project is actually a fairly large construction project, which they're seeking to upgrade to 500,000 water meters and several hundred thousand, or excuse me, 250,000 water meters and 500,000 water meter transmitters over the next 5 years. And it's a very large project as we involve going into almost half of the properties in the city to upgrade the meter or to replace the transmitter. And it will be a very, very high-touch opportunity to kind of check out the water configuration of the properties. There'll be a chance to get people state-of-the-art meters. There'll be a chance to get wireless part of our billing system working to a high standard. And it will be very, very interesting. It'll be an opportunity to look at some new metering technology, some new transmitters. But it will be a very substantial, extensive logistical undertaking to coordinate a half a dozen different vendors and coordinate half the city properly over each of facilitating access to the property cases, and in terms of making sure that they are aware of the meter and to make sure that the meter transmitters are connected to the billing system. And Albert's group will be overseeing the operation. Before they managing it, they'll be handling the half a dozen contracts to make sure the meter and transmitter vendors are doing the work properly. What the ask of the board is for a sort of contract management operation and for a lead assistant to help manage the inventory, to help manage the roster contractors, and to help ensure the pace of placements proceeds as soon as. And so the hope is to have that group select with the RFP out in the market now, and to have that group selected and in place when the contract the meter transmitter replacements start to be registered, when that workflow in the inventory starts. So the board hopes that having that group selected for the large replacement project to give was an aim speed, and it's a small dollar ask for us, so it also give that sense that the water board is up and contract.
The Albert's ready.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the professional services, and again, the work, just clarified, I know because we're not allowed to do contracts on construction work, it's not construction related. These are replacements of meters that we've had contractors do in the past, but Omar has been extremely helpful in having the water board allow us to move quickly to be able to have a professional services in place to manage all of these contracts is what's going to be able to allow us to really scale up, because our partners at OMB have given us a capital program that befitting the need, and so this is going to really help us manage that rollout. We expect contractors we have contracts out right now. We expect to be able to get contractors stood up sometime in June or July. And so by having the firm that would help us with managing all of those contractors come in early, so we can then onboard them and have them ready to hit the ground running once those contractors come off joint. And we've got a really robust response so far from very reputable firms. So we're really confident in the quality. And this is going to help us be the most efficient, move the fastest, really make sure that what we're doing is a data-driven approach. So we're really looking forward to having this resource.
We had the bidder information call last week. We had about 60 different firms on the call. It was a good representation of bad consulting firms, construction management companies, and civil engineering companies. There's a lot of interest in it, even though it's a smaller contract, because we are a big and important customer. There's a lot of demand. We advertise widely like that this sequence, very costly, and a lot of very stake for your team, very serious, and there's a lot of interesting buildings to scale.
I guess the question is this. I feel like I always have my stock question of why this contract coming to the water board and not the others, or why isn't this a contract? So just maybe that's one. But the other is this a normal approach for DEP, or do you typically program manage this with in-house staff for something of this magnitude? How new is this approach?
So I can answer the second part of the question. So I would say one of the role models is using, when we did our billing system implementation or large programs, bringing in outside expertise to help us do something we do once every 10 or 20 years is really valuable, where we don't have this. So like currently, we have contractors mostly focused on large meters, so we're essentially going to be 10 or 20xing that program, and in-house don't have the capabilities to manage all of that at the levels and quality that we would want to. And this is what will allow us to move quickly and to ramp up.
Got it. So this isn't a reaction to any sort of recent historic staffing hiring challenges or things like that.
No, and again, I think I would use the same role model as why we're turning to contractors in the first place. So as I even tell my water use inspectors, right, it's not that we are replacing them with contractors. It's that if we have to replace 600,000 meter reading devices and 300,000 meters in a 3 to 5 year period, it needs to be a both. I need to hire up on my team, which we're working on, and our partners at OMB have been very helpful. But we also need to push and bring in contractors for a short-term need, and then my team's ability to sort of manage those smaller contracts and that sort of state of good repair and maintenance is different for this really short period window where the need and work is so much greater. That's the way we're really thinking about it.
Thanks.
In terms of raising right next to the board, the larger kind of dollar amount, more complex here about is the 6 contracts for the meter and transmitter board, and those are going through the traditional city procurement process, which is a lengthier and in some ways more time uncertain process. So the desire was to have the timing of those, have those in the market, kind of have the anchor of that, and then to kind of go to smaller program management contract once that timing is known, and kind of get that out in the market, kind of have it in place ahead of time, and plus the contract start to register. So it was a sense of the contract needed quickly. They'd been on the front end because we didn't know when the larger kind of registration was going to occur. We want to get it kind of a vendor selected and up and running as his contract started to register and as he started handling. So it's something we couldn't set the timing of until the large procurement was done. And it's a vendor we want to have picked ahead of or about the same time as the large procurement is completed. So have that ready to help us have onboard funds firm to start registry the image and to start the program management on day one as those ones start.
I would argue with planning, you could sequence that in a different way to ensure that you have the contractor on in advance. But
And I make the observation that ultimately the water board pays for it all.
yeah,
This is directly relevant to ensuring we protect the revenue stream. So it's actually even more closely aligned with water boards than normal. And what I think is implicit in what Omar just said is that water boards contracting processes are less cumbersome than so we do use this judiciously, but nonetheless it is an option available to us that I think is entirely appropriate for us to use like in water system.
one question, just kind of timing of that. The RFP was released earlier this month. You're seeking authorization for funding for it now. Is that typically the timing to kind of issue RFP before the authorization for funding? Or?
You know, the board can put information requests at the marketplace. You publish things on the website, you issue public notice, let the authority staff. The place where board authorization becomes relevant is that is contract signed and the money is spent. We can in theory cut RFPs to information gap on behalf of DEP. We always tell the board that time for the information request, if the RFPs go out, the board is aware, but the place where board authorization is required is for when that negotiation results in a contract and the signing is done. So that's where we'd always put a resolution before that. We always tell the board before the procurement team, the RFIs go. We would like to need that resolution about that contract deadline once it gets off.
On the actual rollout of this, is this going to be comparable? I guess it was like 15 or 20 years ago when the initial transmitters and meters were rolled out across the entire city. Is this basically comparable? Like you're going to have to go back and touch most of those? Is that yes? So
The answer is yes.
I remember there being a lot of almost outcry and like conspiracy theory around meters being installed and homeowners, being resistant to it at the time. Have you put thought into the public communications of this so that you could get ahead of that kind of, any worry that homeowners or building owners may have about city or the government showing up to their house?
It's a really great point. Yes, I remember that all too well as well. So the short answer is yes, but that doesn't mean there isn't more we can do. So again, just for some context, one of the big things last time when we did this was that we were rolling out essentially AMI or automated metering infrastructure at the same time that we were also replacing hundreds of thousands of meters that are in even worse state than they are now. So we were getting a lot of folks that were getting basically severely underbilled for say a decade, and then we started getting readings, and then they would get a very large catch-up bill. And so that sort of was associated with this program, but it was actually because we were doing both at once. Thankfully, we're a little bit more ahead of the game this time around, but there's absolutely going to be that point. To your other point, yes, there was the oh my gosh, the RF frequency and radio waves, and so I think we've received less of that over the years as this sort of has been an accepted technology for a while, but it's a good reminder for something for us to be aware of. We have actually been more focused on the communications perspective from hey, we're going to have people show up on your lawn and start drilling into the side of your house very quickly to replace something. So we've been doing proactive communication with the police department. We've been doing mailers and postcards to everybody who we're planning to touch with this program to really inform them about what's going on. We've been utilizing social media, but to your point, Dan, there's absolutely more that we can do, and having a resource like this can help us have the bandwidth more to think about those types of things.
But to that point, we're literally not just showing up unannounced and
Correct.
drilling into someone's building, right?
Correct.
We're
We're
making
doing
appointments and
yes, very, very much so. And so sort of the jobs sort of are two processes. One, you need access to actually get in the basement to do the work. Sometimes you could just do it from the outside, but in both cases, we're proactively communicating with the customers.
But hold on, Albert, I think it is important to know about this. For roughly half of these, you won't need to enter the premise.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
So that is different, right? Because the wiring is already there, and it's just the transmitter that's on the outer side of the building in most cases, it is somewhat less invasive than a regular installation.
right, but we're still making appointments. Or
If it's just external, do we still make an appointment?
No, we don't need it. That's so. And just sort of back to your point about how this is.
it makes the communication of this, of like what is happening in the city, all that more important, whether
You're
it's
100%
electives or local press
Yep.
or
Yep. We're working with them.
Yeah, okay.
And I was here and remember when the last time this was done. I just have to say how critically important this is. I remember the increase in accuracy and decrease in complaints and the tremendous backlog that presents to the staff of having to deal with the bills that are under contestation. So this is critically important not only to the health and well-being of the water system, but to the water board as well, and our ability to accurately get revenues in. With all the efforts that are coming in around the updated billing system that's already in place, conservation and the drought planning, leak forgiveness program, everything you do is tied to the accuracy of this. So fully agree with the commissioner's point on how central this is not only to DEP and the city, but to the water board. And remember the days when this was just first rolled out and what it had been prior to it. So making it more accurate is critical.
I think that's why we're also trying to do such a, I don't, maybe aggressive program, or should I just say proactive program? That's part of the reason for asking for the contract is we're trying to do all these contracts at the same time as opposed to doing it slightly more linearly so we can get as much replacement as fast as possible.
No, and we used to have monthly updates on how many bills were being contested and complaints coming in, and that number has dropped so aggressively. Any other questions from board? Sure.
Just maybe opening up a different can of worms, but what's the funding source for this program? Is this fully city water board money? Is there, and really, is there federal money coming into this that could be?
It's water system.
Yeah, just not custom.
So we have a number of capital contracts for defense contracts. We have a whole program. We could share some details if you'd like, but yeah, it's several $100 million worth of replacements, not just for the MTUs, but also for the, as Albert said, there's a efficiency of scale to replacing meters at the same time in many cases.
Okay.
So the whole plan is to be able to layer those together to be able to do some of that work at the same time.
Great. Well, I would love to, so would have been in the second half of that question to talk about sort of federal funding impacts at some point this meeting. Still I think this exact.
There are no other questions or comments. Maybe we can call the resolution to a vote.
You give it
So
a
moved.
motion to, Craig?
Griffin?
Second.
Yep.
Vera said me.
Great.
Then follow up, please. Voice vote is fine. All in favor?
Aye.
All
Any
opposed?
opposition? No. Resolution.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So next we're going to move on to the approval of consulting agreement with Arthur Stable.
David, speed up if you want up here, speak to it quick.
Sure.
Right. Quick.
Good morning, I'm Elio Paradis, I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Operations of the Bureau of Wastewater Treatment. And here today to speak about Arthur Spangle, where I'd like to retain him as a consultant for our Bureau. Arthur Spangle is highly qualified. He had previously been with the New York City DP for about 35 years with high-level expertise in our wastewater treatment process that includes about 14 wastewater treatment plants. He's also had significant amount of experience with our collection systems, dealing mainly with our 96 pump stations and intercepting sewers, and he's a valuable asset to the department as a consultant and helping us with sustaining and maintaining our wastewater treatment plants in terms of maintenance operations and reliability of services that we provide to the citizens of New York City.
Great.
Questions from
Hi, I'm
Yeah.
Arthur Spangle.
Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
very happy. Thank you, Elio. And I'm primarily helping with the operations and maintenance at Bureau of Wastewater Treatment and trying to improve upon what we already have. And we have some new people who have started, and I've been providing training on many different systems. Had training on disinfection, thickening, bulking control. 2 weeks we're going to have additional training on our anoxic zones, denitrification, going over residuals control, various systems. We have not just training, more of a forum to get active participation with the new employees to get them involved. And I've also been working on maintenance initiatives, specifically a 10-year plan for our tank maintenance, and also coming up with shift PMs. Approximately 2/3 of our staff are on operations, so looking to implement having assignments that do some maintenance during operation shifts to improve our level of PM. So there's various initiatives I'm working on, and it's going to take time. 14 plants and collection facilities. It also takes time to get buy-in for people to make changes to their daily duties where they're going to be doing some maintenance instead of pure operations. So we're trying to get it right. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity. A lot has been accomplished, and I'm hoping to do a lot more.
Have you guys seen a dramatic change or turnover? And kind of, you said there are a lot of new people. Is this a regular trend that you see within DEP and wastewater treatment, or is it a emerging trend of more retirements and new staff coming on?
Seems to come in waves, but right now we have, I believe, 10 new process engineers. So I'm working with them. Tends to be, bulks of people are coming in stages, waves, not just a few people a month.
Particularly with our process engineers, they have engineering degrees, but it takes significant amount of training where we have in-office training where we basically go over a lot of the technical matters that they need to have a very well handle on before they're trained in the field and they're practically maybe up to a year's time where they are partnered with other more senior process engineers, and we also go through formalized training like Artie just described, where we go through different process treatment trainings of how to handle and manage those conditions and how to make modifications that are necessary either seasonally, process upsets, so on and so forth, to make sure that our treatment plants remain in compliance with our New York State DEC mandates.
Like questions from board members, comments?
No, I just, I see here, I like some of that you're drawing on the lessons learned, and then there's updates for improvements. Is there a timeline to work on these updates and improvements for like public messaging and interagency coordination and enforcement? I think it's very good planning. Is there like hard deadlines? Like by when do you anticipate making, particularly I think some of the public messaging, which goes back to scheduling a lot of trips that you've been talking about.
I think that's related to the drought.
The drought?
Yeah, just
Okay. What?
No, just I guess just sort of thank you for your years of service to the city, and this feels like it's helping to transition the next cadre of operators and make sure that they're able to do their job. And
Some transfer of institutional knowledge.
it sounds like it's eminently appropriate. So thank you.
Well, who's there?
If no other comments or questions, can we call a vote on the resolution?
So moved.
Can we get a motion to bring it up to the full?
Moved and seconded.
Voice vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All against? Anybody abstain?
Resolution set.
There we go. All right. Next, we're going to move on to the resolution approving video conferencing procedures. Narissa and Omar, are you making a presentation? The resolution?
Sure. I think, I don't know that we have a presentation, but I think you had some materials in your board package. Obviously, we've been looking at ways to take advantage of New York State law to be able to grant sort of greater participation in meetings. To date, we haven't had the opportunity for board members to call in via video conferencing or other means. So that is allowed under state law. So looking at the state law, basically we're adopting what's allowed by law, which is that members could attend by video conference if they have unexpected or unforeseen circumstances. We would be able to set up a video conference for the day, and that a board member would be able to join via that. Generally speaking, we need a quorum of people physically present in the room, though. That's the thing I want to emphasize. We need a physical quorum of members with us in the room. Not only, that's also great to sort of interacting with the public who generally are coming to visit with us for the meetings as well. But this will allow a member to join by video conference and also comment and vote on, although not as part of the quorum. The one exception I will say is that there is in state law, there's an allowance for joining and also becoming part of quorum in the case of a medical disability that is sort of proven by a doctor. So that is the one exception where someone dialing in could be part of the quorum. But I think, generally speaking, we should assume, that the general approach is for folks to be here in person for the quorum. I think we can't always count on that. So we appreciate all the board members' time coming to join us like you have done today in person. To adopt it, we need a vote, and then there are procedures that get posted. We had a public hearing that was another earlier step on Friday for public to comment. We did not have extensive comment. So after the vote today, those procedures would be posted on the website publicly so that they're aware and available for folks. And then when we set up the video conferencing, the public would also be able to join via that video conference. Obviously, this is for folks who aren't able to join because of unforeseen circumstances. So sometimes that could be a day or two in advance. Sometimes it could be an hour or two in advance. So we'll make that, we'll obviously operationalize that as best as possible if they're truly, I was telling Dan earlier, I sprained my ankle a few months ago, like the morning of the board meeting. So, obviously there are some cases where operations might be tricky, but if folks are not able to join for unforeseen circumstances with enough time to set up a video conference, that the public would notice it publicly as well, not join for.
My general point on this, I think it's great. We're encouraged to be here. The flexibility to join, even either in a quorum or not, sit down on video conference, great. The larger point here to me, I think, is, we shouldn't just notice that to the public, an hour or even a day in advance. It should just be standing that we are having an open meeting that the public can listen to on a regular basis, and make sure that the technology supports more public participation and awareness of what the voter board is doing. So I would encourage this to be, let's always have our meetings be broadcasted on video conference. We'll all have to be here, but we have the flexibility if we need to join remotely on an unforeseen basis, right? But I think it's really helpful to have more public participation. If we're gonna open it up, we shouldn't do it just on the, I sprained my ankle, so let's notice the public that now they can join. This no one's gonna get that in time. I'd rather have it just be open.
Yeah, wondering about that, is there a reason why, maybe there's a variant or somebody reason to set up, or why maybe not just set everything on, because of being around.
Well, and this is being recorded now, right? Although I've listened to those on occasion, and it's not always easy to hear what's happening in the room on that recording. And, maybe we should just work that out so that we're always broadcasting and recording and putting us on.
We have mics here.
Live video.
Yeah, live stream, is that possible?
The challenge is there's always been a request, if we were live casting, want to have two cameras. So the recorder required to be, the meeting would be jeopardized by the capacity to cameras. So the Germans always have two people here, one make the recording, one have the live cast and live stream. It can be done, it's required to.
So we can look into it.
Yeah, for example. And that encourages to look at, I assume that includes the earrings that you delay making in, or those not formal meetings or not foreign? Those don't require.
Yes.
Yeah, those are not numbers. Anyway, we can continue to encourage more people to be aware of the state processes, and it would, I think that's the point. And pass some of those hearings, one online or one opportunity. It just enables us to get more participation and more awareness of the work. That's great.
That was happening. That was during some of the COVID impacted meetings when open meetings laws were basically suspended, suspended in some way, right? And so this is, I think, trying to figure out what's the right going forward without a suspension of those kind of things.
And actually, the New York State law that allows us to make this change is actually valid through 2026. So
Oh, wow.
we would have to make sure also that it gets renewed and under the same terms, or we'll have to check the terms as it comes up for renewal, because we are able to do this through that period now, and have to keep an eye on it as it.
So,
Yeah.
so again, I think this is an effort to make sure that you're taking the fullest advantage with what the law allows it. What you just described, can you, is there a specific request about how future meetings are handled? Because there are a bunch of ideas.
I think my specific request is we should make this open to the public as much as possible, and if that is whether the live streaming or a recording that actually is legible or audible, like both of those I think are worth exploring.
What you, Sarah, will work back to it like?
I think that, yes, it is. I could be explicit about that and say, you come back to the board and let us know what it would take to accomplish both of those things.
Similarly, I don't, why would that, I like that, and it's severe that that would not happen, I don't know, so,
And I guess beyond live stream, I guess the difference between live stream versus enabling participation, which is the next step. Which I assume that's what I would advocate for. Like if you're on a Zoom meeting, people can join, how they can participate, versus being live stream with a cast. So I'm thinking it's trying to
Yeah, it's important to know that the public has no participation in a water board meeting, only in a hearing. Right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and Victoria, Paul, Albert, and others who are, and I'll do what we're lawyers, but my understanding is that there is no provision for the hearings to be virtual. Is that correct? Right. Yeah. So unfortunately,
Why can people not? Why is this public and not stream executives? Does that kind of?
there's a board, it's not, it's a board.
It's a board meeting. I think where if we have to distinguish between the board meeting and the public hearings, I think what it sounds like is what to increase awareness with the public to participate in, you know, to your point, Adam, to increase awareness about water, how we do it, what we do. Is really the public hearings is the forum. So we would may want to encourage focusing on making the worldwide public hearings more out there in advance. Because I know in the past, I worked for Ostos Community College and the public hearing was at my college. I could have helped also disseminate more information. So maybe getting the public hearing schedules out there to advocate, okay, let's increase awareness in the community for community members to go into the public hearings and attend.
But I think you're right, there is a distinction here between
Yes.
the board meetings and the
Right. And the
public hearings,
public-
public hearings. Where I started from, I think there's a point of wanting to make sure that these meetings are available to the public, so they know what we're talking about, what we decide to do, and can hear the deliberation that's happening in the room. I think that is of public interest and value, and would love to hear what those options are for increasing that.
And the two ways being a live stream or a data recording.
Yes, it sounds like those are two of the options.
And then there, second point that was brought up then, tangentially, and I inadvertently brought that up talking about the hearings, where it sounds like there's more ambiguous rules or less explicit around allowing public engagement online during public hearings, that the state law did not incorporate that. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, there's no requirement for those.
No requirement, but is there
But I
allowed?
don't think that I don't think there's any prohibition
Okay.
against.
but we still, as a minimum, have to do the 6 in person.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
But there is an opportunity to clear an online component, a virtual component, in some way to those restrictions. So, I don't believe we need to, feel free to speak up, I don't think we need to amend the resolution, I think we can vote on that, but ask you guys to come back to Dan's request, and I'd add online as well, of, can we think about ways of increasing participation in the hearings, how could online or virtual claims be added to that in a way that is manageable and enables us to have a productive dialogue, and we'll get more feedback and transparency to our work. So with that, I don't want to move to vote on the resolution.
We didn't affect it.
Well, I don't want to move first.
Yes,
Moved
okay.
and seconded,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
We
okay.
can do a voice vote?
Yes.
Aye.
All in favor?
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
None.
Resolution moved, all right. Next, we're going to move on to the presentation on the drug communication policy. Thank you. I know this was a point of discussion at our last few meetings, so appreciate you coming back and giving us information on this, which seems a little historic at this point, given that I think it rained right afterwards.
Which, of course, both, in fact, I'm told, history and Murphy's Law dictate that the best way to end a drought is to declare.
Yes.
So that is, to a certain extent, what happened. As you will recall, we did follow the drought protocol. We went into a watch on November 2nd. We went into a warning on November 18th. We reduced it to a watch on December 16th, having had a significant amount of rain. And then because the wet weather continued and the spring forecast turned wetter than average, we ended it on January 3rd. During that period, we did a public awareness campaign, as I mentioned at our last meeting. It was somewhat limited to our existing social media. We did not take the step that had happened in the previous drought 25 years ago of coming to the water board, asking for a budget, actually spending money on media. We did a lot of internal work. We did have a weekly drought call starting that week or two before the watch was declared, as it looked likely. Thanks to really great work from Albert Kramer and his team at Bureau of Customer Service, we actually developed a new system to track water consumption within city agencies, at least at the largest facilities. And that was something I'll speak to in a moment, which was yet a reminder of how long ago the last drought had been. We did not have, as you were just describing, right, all of the work to put in new meters and have automatic meter reading was well after, that was a decade after the last drought, right? And so all of our thinking about drought actually really was stuck in the world of 2000 or before. And it was really Albert and his team who realized, well, wait a minute, we've got all this data. We don't just have to ask the agencies to do things. We can tell whether their consumption changes, which of course we can also do more broad. We also did a series of meetings with industry groups representing large users of water, so hospitals, large building managers in conjunction with the State Post Teamwork, a couple of others that we did, just to begin educating owners and facility managers about the drought. So that's what we did, and we were really gearing up when the weather turned. So to a certain extent, just as Albert's new tracking tool was ready to be implemented, we downgraded the drought. So we never actually put it into the service, but we learned a number of lessons, which is on the next slide. We did a lot of public messaging, but as I mentioned, we did no paid media, and that is something. And we didn't even do kind of social media paid media, right? So it's only earned media, and so I think we saw the limitations of doing that messaging. It was like this. Because the general public, on a household basis, the impact of water consumption is smaller than the largest users. We did come to the conclusion that those targeted interventions are, in fact, to be disproportionately about to interest groups, and especially if we can target them with data about their own consumption, which we had. We did learn, of course, that even the city government's kind of construct has changed. The Office of Emergency Management, where at NISM today, right, was not anywhere near as big a deal the last time that we had a drought. And so, in fact, all of our drought protocols did not focus on employing NISM the way that we employ NISM at the heart of basically any other emergency requiring out of the ordinary interagency coordination. So that's something that we always do. We need to engage the state, and we did that informally, and it's actually quite good that over the last several years we've developed a very good working relationship, both at the staff level and at the agency head level with state DEC. But we didn't have the kind of standard protocols for doing that. It was much more informal than it would be ideal. Another thing that was different, again, because the last time we had a drought, we read meters in person. And so we had a lot more water inspectors than we do today. And it was the water use inspectors who were, as we look back at 2001, the arm of city government that actually enforced the drought regulations. And so had we gotten to the point of an emergency, there would have been active restrictions on the general public. We really did not have the in-house capability to enforce them, that those that we had relied on in 2001, I forget, we had numbers, how many tickets the DEP actually issued. Thousands and thousands of violations during the drought of 2001. and we would not be able to do that.
Force and fall to now.
Keep on. That's one of the gaps that we've uncovered.
Yeah.
Right, so we have to think differently about that.
Does it just automatically default to like PD or something?
It would, you know, and I will say, I think one of the things that worked well, for example, and it happened very quickly right after we declared the drought watch and the internal messaging, actually before we declared the watch, we found the police department became very aggressive at calling us when they found filter hydrants. And so our response time for how long we lost water due to a hydrant that the public had opened, right, for recreation, was much shorter because PD was out there calling it in and we weren't waiting for some random member of the public to call it in or one of our trucks to drive the train. And so that worked well, but we never got to the point of sitting down with PD and talking about, well, how are you going to help us lawn watering restrictions if when it comes to that.
Right. Or whether like DOB or sanitation inspectors or like is there other infrastructure that could be helpful in something like that?
Yes, I mean, I've given how understaffed DOB is, I can't imagine what Commissioner Otto would say if I broached that idea, but nonetheless, I hear it. And so, in any case, this is we need to that leads to this final point that's on the screen that we do need a new way of thinking about how we operationalize those drought emergency rules, should they become necessary. Next.
Two quick questions. One, you did the public messaging. Did you guys see a difference in any water consumption between November 2nd, January 3rd?
So, at an aggregate level, and you know, there's enough literature that reminds us that these changes don't take place right. People don't change their behavior on the day they hear news. That is a really small. Which is why, for example, you know, an analogy that certainly, you know, Dan and Adam, you both know, is Con Ed's demand response. Right? When there's a risk of brownout, yes, Con Ed is out there asking people to turn down their air conditioners. But what they're relying on is pre-existing protocols with large users. Right?
And financial incentives.
And financial incentives, which may or may not be the right answer for us, but it is the kind of thing that I think we need to take a leaf from the way they've done it. And again, since they've done a lot more of those in a world of new technology, real-time data, social media, etc. Yeah.
Thanks. A question earlier today. So much so you decide like how much there's like a decrease in water consumption you expect to see. You'll range with 5%, 4%, 20%. Well, I don't know if the kind of the range of variation if it's around those existing rates, both biggest customer incentives. Like, what's the?
Well, you know, look, I mean, Jude, it's a good question. As we look back on the past and tapped kind of the conventional wisdom or the experience of the staff that had been there through previous drafts, what at least I was told was we could expect maybe a 5% reduction. Right. Which is not nothing, right?
Yeah.
That gives you an extra day of water for every 20 days you're in a traffic emergency. So that's not, but it is not going to provide kind of or like overnight dramatic reductions.
What's like toss and idea what other cities or places do you obviously? I'm just trying to understand like. Obviously, you guys see, but I didn't know about this. I'm more mechanically, you know, and so it's hard to know. And
Well, look,
it's hard to
this
establish it today.
again, this is the kind of thing. It hadn't come up, right?
Is it 20% outsplaying forward and the 50%? What's like?
I think one of the things, so we've only had some preliminary conversations, and one of the things that I think is interesting, because we've realized that the cities that are most prone to extreme drought are actually the ones where water conservation is already really, right? Los Angeles has a whole set of percent, and we did talk to the deputy mayor of Los Angeles at the beginning. They have a whole set of water conservation initiatives in place year round, no matter what the weather.
Oh, it was straight there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the base on which they're operating is somewhat different, right? Because they've already tackled some of the things that for us, it may not be as important during normal times, but we might need to turn on. And one example, actually, the deputy mayor of Los Angeles mentioned to me was power washing, right? I mean, every New Yorker knows that in the morning people are out there hosing down the streets, and those hoses use a lot of water. In Los Angeles, that is banned, and they have to use high-pressure washers, which do the same job of cleaning with a lot less water, but it is a piece of equipment that these buildings are required to buy.
Just something you're saying is like what we do with this is wrong. It's like, okay, different things in these cells are different trenches to get assumed that different marvels of water conservation. So let's say these are a lot of numbers when they're like Los Angeles is better water conservation laws than Boston use every person used to have a gallon usually years. I'm not sure the US stuff is. I use 150 gallons a year if they have better water conservation methods. So there's like the absolute number, I guess. And I think what you're saying is that you get better water conservation, the like shift became easier. I don't know if that's what you're saying. Because I'm less asking about like what the absolute numbers are. It's around like in breaks in some times, like how much percentage is going to shift in those investing. And maybe there is a root mechanism that we're saying for better conservation overall, that enables you to better shifts of the 100%. I think those are only still.
Well, actually,
this is about the shift in emergency tolerance, right?
yeah, I was thinking about it slightly differently, where it's at the reverse of what you were just saying, because I think the way you asked the question is how much can another city produce? And I'm not gonna, we haven't done like a
It's
comprehensive.
not emergency coverage, you're reducing, right? Like how much you can shift.
No, exactly. And I'm not certain that Los Angeles would be great comparable for a couple of reasons. One, weather is very different, obviously, at the amount of outdoor space in the average housing unit. It's very different kinds of squadrons. But the other thing is, if they have already done something like changed the profile of how buildings are washing sidewalks, they don't have the ability to reduce that. Whereas we could, and the drought emergencies would simply ban them, right? And that should give us a bigger ability to reduce from our base, right? From our app. I think it's a really good question. As you can tell, we only got a little bit into understanding this, and so the reason you all asked at our last meeting when we were still in a drought to talk about what our messaging would be. And so this is to a certain extent substituting for that because we didn't go into messaging. But what we have done is we've taken some lessons from what we experienced, realized just how out of date our thinking about drought was. And one of the things we will be working on this year is a number of things so that we have a much more state-of-the-art approach to doing this.
This is a stupid question probably, but how much is a mandated list for what to focus on water conservation and like efficacy beliefs? Or of the board to view it well? Because I guess I'm just trying to wonder if like that's I don't know what's it's the
Well, look,
in my opinion.
a water utility is generally, water utilities do manage water consumption, right?
So is it part of our mandate to like try to be as efficacious as possible?
Yes, and of course, New York City has done a really good job, like for the last 30, 40 years. General demand, going back to the 1980s, was 1.4 billion gallons a day. Our average demand now is a little over 1.0. So we've had a significant reduction. Now, New Yorkers were very high consumers of water on a per capita basis, and still are in many ways. But the reality is, because we have basically a system that was sized for a daily consumption of 1.4 billion, and then we were able to bring it down, the reality is DEP hasn't focused as aggressively on water conservation over the last 15 years or so, right? And again, I think part of what we saw last year is that we're going to have to take another look at that. makes sense. That's
That's
what we were doing. That's very good.
Generally speaking, we've seen a decrease of about 1% per year in consumption. That's what we use as a general rule of thumb. We have a graph we could show you actually, if you're interested, of how that's looked over the last 10 to 20 years. We use that even just in the rate modeling, knowing that the consumption drops, therefore the revenue tracks, to a certain extent to that drop. But, even now, actually, the next presentation that Albert's going to do is about our multifamily conservation program. And we're actually taking a look at that because we were looking at it already it's an older program. It was kind of ripe for taking a look at better enforcement of it, but it also coincided with drought happening, really sort of drought coming to us, the need to take a look at that program and how it's doing. But one of the drives of that program is around conservation. So it's certainly still very much on our minds. And as Rid has talked about before, ironically with climate change, we're going to tend to see higher water, right? Our bigger issues are higher rainfall, the rain bursts, the sort of stormwater and flooding. But that's going to be coupled with these moments of intense drought. So the drought will be much less than the more water, but we're going to have both of those extremes, it looks like, from the modeling.
Makes sense.
Climate change. So we have to think of both.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess if that's the case, because I think obviously, or just in my perspective, Cowboys perspective, oftentimes I feel like I know our main focus is around the studying and financing of the system. But this is an important component. I'm removing my own personal interest aside from what our authority is and what we're trying to do. It's going down a movement that's more to focus. I was starting learning more about it. You're sensing, I know you're sensing programs around it. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know what the per capita usage of water in New York City is. And what is that compared to other cities and what are you trying to aim for? It's great to understand what percent decrease a year, but that doesn't really mean anything to me. And so, is that something we're trying to do? And then I don't know how to keep it makes sense that there's some shifts and just what kind of resilience we need to build in. And is that something we should be focused on as a benchmark or KPI that we're trying to understand? Because I think usually for these meetings, it's okay, are we financially stable? Great. What are we investing in? And that's incredibly great. If it's somebody's own treaty, try to invest in understand. I'd like to understand more about that, which I think does make sense of doing. I would love to support that and do that. I'm trying to get a sense of that, that's what I mean. Is it really called financing or is it conservation that we're doing? It makes sense.
Well, look, I guess, and maybe I'll speak to the overall charter or see what you go like that on the pipe. I think the way I understand it, your main task is to make sure there's enough budget. Right. And by extension, you also therefore have the right to ask us if we're doing the right things so that we're not wasting much. And that gives you a reasonable ability to ask a broad set of questions. The one thing I would say is I think I think it's very important for us to get our drought plannings modernized. I also think it's important not to fall prey to fighting the last war. We have to look at a bunch of different things. For example, as you might imagine, we are asking the question, well, all right, what is the extreme scenario in which our hydrants might run out of water, right? Because that just happened in Los Angeles. It was a bit of a fluke. The good news is it would take a breathtakingly extreme scenario here, so I think the risk is minimal. But that's yet another thing, right? One of our key tasks and one of our, frankly, the reason New York City's water system was started was because of the fire of 1835, right? And so making sure we have enough water to deliver to the fire department is part of our task. And of course, dealing with stormwater. So what I think is important for us to do is to make sure that we are balancing our efforts, not overdoing anything unless it is in reference to the kind of stat rank of the different risks and priorities. It's a long-winded way of saying conservation is important. I think we've been managing it, as Narissa says Albert's going to talk more in his next presentation about something related to conservation. But I think it is also really important to remember that in contrast to a place like Los Angeles, water conservation is not our top priority because, in fact, the biggest water issue New Yorkers face is stormwater. It is not actually a lack of water.
And Duke, to my point of view, I view our role as, you know, has told us this, you know, it's about the fiscal health of the system. But I would argue that fiscal health is predicated on a well-functioning and resilient system.
Yeah.
And I see our job is asking the questions. Have you guys considered this? Not to micromanage and say this is how you should consider it, but give us comfort as we are going out to the market and asking investors to pay for our bond to invest in the future of the system. Are we confident that is being managed in a way that in 30 years will still exist that allow us to collect revenues, which is just a great issue. To one point and then one question, and then one is the question of, are there other things like this that are now coming to light of standard protocols for emergency situations that need to be updated and looked at, as this hasn't been kind of dusted off in 20 years? Just thinking about that as you're going for operations. And then I'd be remiss if not to say, this is exactly why we need to do things like automatic meter in the billing system, the upgrades to the billing system, so that we have more accurate information, more quickly move and understand and target our efforts. I think in general, messaging to the public will not yield great results unless there's viewed emergency. Saying here are our 50 biggest users where we're seeing water spikes, let's get them to shut down because you now have that information, will allow us to get faster, more impactful efforts. Not to say we don't message the public as well, but that will take longer to get those changes in. And leading into the billing system, as I always talk about, also gives us the opportunity to think about how we send price signals around conservation and thinking about that paired with other efforts that I'm sure we'll talk about more this year, or maybe at the end of the meeting, of how we can think more creatively about how we price our water and what that looks like. So I think there are lots of opportunities.
So just wrapping up on this kind of point, that's really helpful. Thank you. I hope it's not digressing too much, but is there any like off-the-shelf information around just the amount of water you see to other cities, and
Yeah.
if you were to understand that and what the evidence for that would be?
Yeah, absolutely. We look at those numbers even just when we present the rates each year and how our costs compare to other cities. That's based on sort of per capita usage and
Yeah,
that
I might
kind
have
of
missed
thing.
it, but just,
Yeah. Yeah.
just like whatever's easy, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot, but I think it's helpful to understand how that compares and and then two, like, I guess related to all this, both the open access conversation around getting more understanding, and I fully support like the wireless water and just like understanding what's happening. I guess I'm speaking as I'm a homeowner. I feel strange. You guys should know more. On the line, like, don't live that much. Maybe that's an issue, but I didn't really know that this was happening every night. And maybe that means I'm not plugged in enough. I want to do more. I don't know. Did like everyone get an email? Like, I don't think I got an email. I might have missed it. Like, just as a homeowner, like that this is happening, encourage us to consider, like, did everyone get an email? Like, did I miss that as a homeowner?
I think you're highlighting the challenges of communicating with all of our customers that I think Rick was talking about. And so this is one of these things where we were on the precipice of putting a message on all bills because we had just entered the warning stage, and then thankfully it started raining. But that being said, I think that, as Britt is saying, we're doing a full look at how did we communicate, who are we communicating to. Obviously, lessons learned. I think it's safe to say, right? There's room for improvement, right?
Is there a way to say? I don't know. Why don't you get emails?
We absolutely could get to a place where we're sending emails. We have, and to what Adam was saying in terms of data driven, right? We have our leak notification program where we're sending emails to folks who have that. We were contemplating, should we tighten that threshold to say, instead of triple your average consumption, we're in a drought, it's going to be double, right? We were on the precipice of doing all of those things. Thankfully, we didn't need to, but you're absolutely right. That's the direction we definitely want to go.
What resource changes would need to happen to do that? Is it like you're staffing certain things? That's just a practice thing?
Juki, I think we need the time, and as you know, we do not have a lot of staff to do big thinking stuff, right? It's just a reality. Across the city, you're understaffed for all sorts of things. So we will do some of this thinking, and we will report back to you. But
I just don't like an email without much thinking. I don't think this is big strategy stuff. It's just regular as a homeowner, so you get an email.
But I think the point I make is we didn't hit the point
Yeah.
where that was
Yeah.
necessary.
I think we talked last time, GK, which maybe you weren't able to join for, but we did have a whole round of different media, free media that we took advantage of. So there were, there were television interviews, there were media up on all of the various city media streams.
Taxi TV.
The taxi TV. So we had taken advantage of all the sort of easy, free, quick media we could do. But the reason this was on the agenda was because the board last time asked some great questions about what would be the next step of communications if you're heading into, the full emergency. How do you make best use of current media to make sure that the coverage is bigger than it is now? Because actually they raised the same question as last time, which was when you're in the warning, we're not feeling the communications as much as we would expect. What happens when you go to an emergency? So we were on the customers.
And again, I think that is all by design, right? There is a certain amount of kind of inertia you have to build up to create public awareness about integrating, right? So the starting point of the watch and then the warning allowed us to build a certain amount of awareness, and I at least among the people I know, there was a pretty good awareness of the facts that we were in a drought. It had not yet translated into what do I need to do about it. And that, as there is an Albert said, or a bit, and affects is that book.
So I think we have more conversation to come on all these issues. Really appreciate you circling back on our request and bringing this to us. I'll just note that Member Fernandez Ketchum has a leave for a previous engagement, but we have no more resolutions or things requiring a quorum, so we can continue for discussion, but no formal action be taken by the board during this period. With that, do we want to move on to the update from the commissioner and from Albert on the Ford multifamily conservation billing program?
Absolutely. I figure just save your necks, I'll stand here. One direction. So for those that don't know me, Albert Kramer, Deputy Commissioner, Bureau of Customer Services. So just quickly, why are we here? What are we asking? Not asking you to make a decision about anything. As we've talked about before, we're taking a hard look at our multifamily conservation program. Why do we care? It's $1 billion worth of our revenue, almost a quarter of what we bill. So anytime we talk about changes to that larger program, we're obviously thinking very carefully and taking prudent steps. Roughly 24,000 customers. Again, this is essentially a flat per unit charge per year. It's a flat rate, and we have a lot of rules that go along with it. It's supposed to be a balance between making sure that there are conservation measures in place to go around with that flat rate. As you said, there's no market incentive to save if it's a flat rate. However, this is a very important program. It also is a very important program for affordable housing across the city. LIHTC, HPD properties, Mitchell Lamas, and also pseudo-affordable housing in low-income neighborhoods. So next slide, please. One of the things that, as we've been taking a deeper look into this, we see that there are folks who are coming out on both sides of that sort of ledger of, on the right-hand side, you got folks who are using way more water than they're technically paying for because it's a flat rate. And then on the left-hand side, you have a lot of folks who are, in theory, maybe paying a little too much on that flat rate. However, the major caveat being that as a meter ages, those meters underreport. And as we have had to prioritize limited resources for meter replacements, we have deprioritized flat rate customers for obvious reasons. Now that, as I said before, our partners at O&D have equipped us with a substantial capital program that will allow us to make the investments in meters and meter reading equipment that we've been talking about across this meeting. This will allow us to focus on these customers in a different way. I firmly believe that a lot of these folks who are on the left-hand side are there because their meters are underreporting. Once we get a better meter in place, they'll be well within the range. But there are some folks who may not know enough about their consumption, they may want to take a harder look. And if there's a way for, especially in the affordable housing community, for folks to reduce their expense, well then that is something we want to at least have data transparency for our customers to make that decision for themselves. Next slide. And I won't belabor the discussion about the drought that Rick very nicely teed up and we were all engaging with. I just want to emphasize the last point, which is that because we've been taking a deeper dive into the data, we believe there's billions of gallons a year, again, a year, not a day, but billion with a B, of conservation opportunity. And to your point, Juge, you're absolutely right. We need to take a harder look at this, and then putting myself in your shoes, if I were you, I would want to make sure that DEP was looking at non-revenue opportunities for conservation far before or in addition to revenue, where these are opportunities where if a customer is using 100% more than their flat rate, if we even cut that in half and now they're only using over 50%, that's water saved at no cost to the system, no need to offset and raise rates on other customers in order to offset those savings. So this is sort of the low-hanging fruit that we really want to dig into.
And while there is not while the marginal cost of a gallon of drinking water is relatively low, it is not zero.
Yeah, it's huge. This is good. It's great.
So this is the sort of data-driven approach that we're taking using the consumption data that we have. So next slide, I want to talk about some of the directions we're thinking of going. And again, none of this is what we're going to be bringing to rate setting. This is still a work in progress, but it's reflective of the feedback that the board gave us at our last update a few months ago. And one of the things that we're going to be focusing on is we believe that a balance of leak audits and a greater attention to conservation for these customers, plus the consideration of surcharges or some sort of additional cost for customers that are using well above the sort of assumed allotment within the MCP program will allow us to rein in unexpectedly high consumers while also finding that right balance. And so leak audits can look like, and I'll talk a little bit different, but we've been so focused on, do customers have efficient toilets, yes or no? But again, to your point about how are we thinking about conservation? If there's a leak, that's a win-win, right? That's not intentional usage. That's accidental usage that is having a cost on our system. That could be a win-win with customers. And in the past, DEP actually had contracts in place to do leak audits with customers. So we're looking at, can we replace that with a desk audit, data-driven approach to find these customers? And when the ones that we do actually need to go out to, we're a lot smarter about who we're targeting. We're also going to work with customers to resolve delinquencies. Again, thanks to the City Council, the administration, we now have lien sale as an enforcement tool in place. The 90-day list, I believe, is February 12th, so coming up fast. And we believe that that's going to help us engage with customers. Again, we don't want to sell anybody into lien sale. We want to work with customers to bring them into good standing. We offer very, very flexible payment agreements. So we think that this is going to help us work with customers that have been struggling in this program and bring them back into good standing. Point 3, it talked about data transparency. When we first launched the MyDP account in the MCP program in 2012, when we expanded it, we had an online tool to help folks weigh their cost on meter charges versus flat rate. We also did outreach to customers. We could absolutely send customers emails as part of this outreach. We want to help people understand and make sure they're making a conscious decision. I firmly believe that a program that's been in place now for almost 13 years, if somebody's still on it, they're there for a reason. But that being said, we want to ensure there is default bias exists. I get it. And we want to ensure that folks have access to it so they're making informed decisions. And finally, as we looked at this, we really think about what is the purpose of this program and seeing that there's the benefit for affordable or semi-affordable housing. We want to come up with a definition, still to be determined, to shape this program in a way going forward where new entrants are meeting that affordable criteria, because we really do feel that this is a benefit to certain customers, and we don't want customers that can maintain a well-run building, put in modern low-use fixtures. They shouldn't need this program, and so just as the future shaping of this program, to essentially grandfather in everybody who's here currently, and then going forward, new entrants would have to be of affordable properties. That's the way we're thinking about currently. And I want to emphasize, we did work with our rate consultant, with the Water Finance Authority, ran the models. We don't expect these changes to have anything more than a limited rate impact, and certainly no rate impact as a part of fiscal 26 rate setting. We also think that this type of data transparency, and Rick always tells me, people deserve to have the data in their hands to be able to make the right financial decisions for themselves. So we think that this does make billing fairer for all New Yorkers, which is a really important message that we should always be delivering. And feel free to interrupt me at any time. Next.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I know the board has been interested in the use of technology for analytics in past meetings, and again, just to re-emphasize what Albert said about the leak audits, like this, because of the billing system, because of the data we have for the first time, we can actually do the kind of desk audit that Albert's saying and actually use the data to look for those leaks, as opposed to actually having to have people physically go out. So that's really exciting, because it means we can get a lot more done more efficiently as a first pass than having to have people out in the field or contracts in place, which can fund spent to put in and that kind of thing. So that's exciting.
Absolutely. It's amazing what you can learn from seeing overnight consumption that's on par with normal consumption. Something's probably going wrong if you're just that much water at 3 in the morning. Next slide, please. And so we just wanted to give you a feel for where these properties are, and I want to address the elephant in the room, Dan. We did a double check on Staten Island. We did make sure that on the right-hand side, the reason why no properties are popping up is because, as you see on the left, where the lighter shades are where MCP properties are not. So there are MCP properties in Staten Island, just not in the same density as other parts of the city. You can see that a lot of them are in northern Manhattan, a lot of in the Bronx, in central Brooklyn. These are, parts of the city, many that are lower income. And that's why we need to be prudent and make sure that anything we're doing is taking into consideration the unique participation profile of these properties. We can't just slap a 50% surcharge on affordable housing and expect that that's not going to have an impact. So that's something we're fully considering, and that's why today we're still running the numbers and thinking through what is the best approach to add that incentive for conservation, but also make sure that it's something that's fair and works for this customer base. Next slide, please. And so, as I talked about before, we believe that any impact on revenue will be marginal. And again, if a customer goes off of the program to metered billing in order to save money, that has an impact on the total amount they're paying us. There's also a time value of money. We bill MCP customers annually, so we get a lot of that revenue up front. If that gets split up over quarterly bills or monthly, that doesn't come as quickly. On the other hand, we are looking at surcharges that could increase revenue that comes in, which could very well offset the number of people that might want to make a move. We also don't expect that any change we would make would happen overnight. These are large financial decisions that customers need to make. They probably don't want to see the amount of usage that they've had for a full year. There's going to be a lot of meter replacement work. So this is very much something that we see as a shift over a 3 to 5 year period. And that's part of what mitigates any rate impact, but that's something we're very much still evaluating, but we're trying to be conscious of this as well. And finally, just talking about what a timeline might look like. So this spring, we're really going to amp up that leak audit program, starting with the desk audit, maybe some more limited inspections. As part of rate setting, we're thinking right now the ask would be the closing off of the program to non-affordable applicants. There's the surcharge framework. While we're thinking right now it would take effect in fiscal 27, we're still thinking about, is that something we should bring in fiscal 26 to talk about for fiscal 27? Is it best to just communicate an intention to customers and then make that as part of fiscal 27 rate setting? That's something we're still thinking about, and obviously would welcome input at a future board meeting. We'll certainly talk again about this before we're in rate setting. And then in the fall of this year, this is where we're going to start to do more of that communication with customers, that data transparency. We'll do more of those leak audits, actually probably some boots on the ground. And as we're ramping up and getting more of those contracts in place to do meter replacements, we'll make sure that customers that were on that map a few slides below are top of the line to get state-of-the-art meters and meter reading equipment put in place, so that we have the data we need so that us and customers can make the best decision. And then at fiscal 27, that's when we're currently thinking a surcharge would go in place. And again, the goal is not to put surcharges on customers. The goal is to engage with customers, work together, help to understand their needs. We're actually meeting with Housing Preservation and Development. It's either later today or tomorrow to talk about how can we partner with them to identify leaks, help them, support them. If a customer is going to be taking the right steps, does that allow them to push off that surcharge? But at least now there's an incentive where there wasn't before. And so just really quickly on the next slide, just to give like a case study, why this is so tricky. So there's one property, it's a 123 unit building in Brooklyn. Not many Department of Buildings violations. I like to think that's because it's a well-run building, not because DOB is so short-staffed, but who knows? But we don't know why they're using so much, but they are using way more water than we would expect. And so is it just high occupancy, right? When we talk to the super, they say, well, this definitely is very high occupancy property. Is that what's driving it? Or are there leaks that we're not detecting and need to take a greater look? Or next slide, please, Mark. There's another example where, the data shows that they may have been 25% better off if they were on meter charges instead of flat rate billing. But is that because this is a special type of usage of the property? It's the residential housing for doctors. Is it because they're not spending as much time in the property? So the reason why we're sharing this is just to show that it's complicated. It really is case by case. But we understand the importance of this program, and in the sort of larger narrative of climate change, we need to really focus more on droughts, trying to find conservation that's a non-revenue waterway. So we're going to be continuing to dive into this further.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Appreciate it. I know, Dan, you particularly looked into this in the past, and it has good questions. Really appreciate the thoughtfulness that's coming into this. Any questions or comments from the board?
I could add just two points that we covered the last time we spoke about this, but one was the somewhat surprising finding to us that we thought after several years, not enforcing MCP's requirements, that there would be a lot of buildings that were way out of compliance in terms of fixtures, and actually it's not many. So that was not a thing. The other thing that is really relevant here is what share is NYCHA of this?
In terms of the revenue, it's like 20% or so.
Yeah, so roughly 20% of the MCP revenue is NYCHA. And it turns out NYCHA is actually in pretty good compliance, right? Which again, we're very worried we're going to find a lot of stuff there. Turns out NYCHA is doing everything it's supposed to, but we also have to think about anything we do to MCP will either impact NYCHA, or we may need to think about a separate public housing rate, which many other water utilities have, right? And so there's as Albert said, it's complicated.
So just one quick question. Do we expect to see any of this in this year's rate setting?
Definitely, yes, absolutely. So I think what the best answer would be, we know that at least the closing off of the proposal to close off the new applicants outside, yes, absolutely. And we're still trying to figure out the surcharge.
Thank you.
So everyone, please, thank you for sharing all this, and thank you for opening more use of kind of the data analytics and RSU law and Korea. I think that feels a lot of promise and could be a lot more. A little bit different as a kind of follow-up wrap. I think this is for multi-unit things, and just again, I think the guidance makes sense. Again, I'm going back to thinking about myself as a user here, and I had a notification for my W weeks, and what is usage? 3x usage or something?
Yeah, triple consumption.
Triple consumption usage. And I should know this better. Hey, where do I look at, etc. And then I didn't realize it was a leak. And then I texted my attendants, hey, is there a leak? Well, oh yes, there's a leak. You know? And I was like, why didn't you say anything? You went along. And I guess just thinking about that kind of experience, and I think you mentioned this point earlier, this 3 times, 2 times. What would it take for me to set the threshold? And is there more way that I can have access to understanding data in real time? Or else I still know what's going on. Like, how hard is it to do that? When you do that across the board, is there an API I should probably notice? Is there an API? Is there other stuff we can use? Or do you consider to what's going on today?
So the good news is that yes, you as a property manager of a tax class 2 multifamily residential property, or even a tax class 1, can adjust your threshold.
Great.
So you can set that parameter to say, I want to be. No, it's okay, it's okay. But, you know, one of the struggles is we have a lot of functionality, but to your point, how do we communicate that to
Yeah.
customers to make sure that folks are taking advantage of it? You know, there's people in this room who have talked about, you know, APIs and access to consumption information. The challenge is how do we make sure that water consumption data is both a really powerful public policy tool. It's also a very intimate private data in terms of you can tell which, you know, single family homes are vacant and therefore should be a target for burglary, right? So we got to balance those different extremes, but I think we have a lot of data that's available to our owners, and this is just one example of how can we better equip them with that data, remind them about that data, and how they can use it to make the best decisions for them.
One of the other issues is like with the wireless metering. I just think about data.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying around that, but there's generally inclined to have more data out there and that's cool. But even like going back to hiring that, like what would it take to have a wireless meter so like public can see it, and then I think it's great to have it so you can strategize time. It's like, oh, there's higher service choice that you check it off, but to do like what is the feature across the board? You know, like, I feel like you won't see it out there. Even if you go on the internet, I'll just monitor things for free. And I can be semi-do it kind of solution without that much work. And so like I don't know. I guess that's a lot of passion.
I just sorry, you're thinking about having data that people can monitor how other people are using water in real time.
I think it's just like one is like open data. How much data do you have? There are really guys about this. I understand that. I guess there may be some issues all shared from one of the prisons you use, but I personally think that's a condition. But I think if there's more data out there with access, I think people can utilize it differently, whether it's for homes or for like the example around the water hydrants, if that's happening. I don't know how the plastic you see. It seems like, you know, it's hard to tell if a water hydrant's open, and that's why you have like PD respond, you shut down quickly. But is there a way that's more like the wireless meet across everything so that people can see it and get much more like ability to data and to understand whether leaks or open of hydrants, whatever is happening across the board, so that you know, you just quickly responding to I think the broader general question around
Yeah.
scheme.
Look, I think, you know, we've got a number of things that we have been doing to have a better understanding of how the system is operated. We do through Bureau of Water and Consumer Operations, they do have a good sense of where water is flowing, so it doesn't get down to the level of us being able to figure out remotely that a hydrant is open. Right? I think that is actually to
Is
Alex's
that
point
viable?
about.
Does anyone do that? Like they're like it should be super cheap, right? I don't know if this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, do get look I also spend time in the technology industry. I understand, yes, there's a lot that has changed. We've done this Environment Tech Lab initiative that we've been doing now for 2 years, where we're trying to drive technology into the system. Again, because our top priority in recent years has been around stormwater. A lot of our efforts around this have been focused on stormwater flood net system, which will actually be further expanded based on money that was agreed for us in the January plan, so I'm happy about that. And then we are also starting a smart sewers system so that we can understand the flow through the sewers, which is a way to be able to get ahead of things like sewer backups and flooding. So the answer is, of course, yes. It is also, of course, around how much, where are we targeting our very small staff that has the ability to do innovation. Yeah.
Right, relations. What if people volunteer? Like with collision at all to do that exact survivability of any of these things that I use, like, I'm sure you,
Yeah, and advantage also, Mitch, when I say that, this may be something we will want to take offline and have a further conversation on as well, but I think you're raising important questions around data and how we're using it, and to Rick's point, how we're prioritizing it as well. So not to cut off the conversation, but suggest maybe let's move into another setting where we can get in deeper. Any other questions around multifamily conservation program?
I mean,
Albert, thank you for coming back for this. Which does move us into any other business that members would like to bring before the board. I know, Dan, you would ask a question for federal funding. Is this stuff that you'd like to continue on that, Klein?
Well, I think every organization that can impacts it, executive order, funding changes, even the example in California, like the Army Corps going in and changing a water management infrastructure and opening a valve, like what's our total exposure here as we head into the rate season on, particularly the funding, but I don't think we have any integrated infrastructure in that same capacity. But I'd be curious to hear how you're thinking about all of this, as it relates to the great setting exercises that we've gotten to.
Well, look, we've certainly, as as basically every organization in the country pretty much does, I have to think about what this administration means for us. I think, yes, to your point, Dan, about what the Trump administration did in terms of mismanaging water in California last week. That I don't see a big risk. We are firmly in control of our reservoirs.
Yeah.
The only real interface we have on an operating basis with the Army Corps of Engineers is in the Delaware, and in fact, it's kind of the opposite there. We've been pushing the Army Corps to be more flexible in how they manage the F.E. Walter Dam, so that we could have a requirement to at least let out of the Delaware reservoirs to keep the Delaware flowing. It is the state really that would have the potential to interfere with how we operate our reservoirs, because all of our partners then are state partners, not federal governments. The funding side we've certainly been paying attention to, because in part, of our robust water rate system, and the fact that until the Biden administration, there just wasn't that much money for water infrastructure from the federal government, until you go back 25 years. Our exposure is, we believe, manageable. It's painful because our biggest grants, our biggest things that are at risk are the New Island Blue Belt, Mid-Island Blue Belt, thank you, in Staten Island, which has a good chunk of federal money in it. We're assessing what we might need to do about that. Several of our cloudburst projects received federal grants, and we've got several grant applications outstanding. So some of them are in that category that are obligated that we thought were safe, but may or may not be safe given what is going on in Washington. And then some are at greater risk. But we are actively thinking about what we might need to do to protect the agency from the downside of that material not showing up. I do not have anything yet on tariffs. I mean, clearly, as we've seen over the last several years, an inflationary environment is very bad for the agency, just because of how that will affect our construction costs. And, I think it will take a little while for us to figure out what a given set of tariffs could mean for the bids that we are expecting. And that could be really painful. There's no question about it. And then the tariffs, I have not yet gotten a sense of whether we have a significant OPEX exposure. The biggest thing that I've thought about and we will look into is chemicals that we might be importing from Mexico. Chemicals have gone way up in price over the last 5 years anyway, so this could just continue that. Obviously, you're all well aware that interest rates are one of our key issues, and as our capital plan continues to grow, that becomes even more significant. And then there is concern in Washington that the House of Representatives may actively be considering eliminating the tax-free status of municipal bonds. And that could be devastating to us. And I think it's fair to say that if that were to happen, it would directly lead almost immediately, almost on an emergency rate change basis, to a dramatic increase in water rates that you look. How you're the reigning expert on this around here. Do you have anything? Did I get anything wrong?
No, just that it is being discussed on a bunch of different levels, and in Washington, in the House, in the Senate, advocacy groups, Project 2025. That was provision of Project 2025. So,
They should not come
remains
as a
to be
surprise to
seen
us.
what's gonna. We'll get more clarity on this issue when we see a tax bill.
Now, would that impact the existing bonds or any
No.
new issuances?
With each perspective.
So it makes me wonder, are we going through the exercise of, that I'm sure you are, looking at what issuances you have planned and whether it's worth expediting anything?
That's for the
Over-
finance
sorry.
and
Yeah.
it will be in the controller's office, Dean Atomic.
Bill, you lost.
Yeah, we're very seriously looking at ways to mitigate it. And that it's the shopping. Take it back and do everything.
But to that point, we might be able to move one bond,
Yeah.
but it doesn't detect this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to raise the whole 10-year capital.
Yeah.
Tax law, just borrow taxes then.
Yeah.
Or projects that react hard.
So it is potentially devastating, and it would be quite correct.
Future. Yeah. How are you looking at any potential regulatory changes, PFAS or other risks?
Look, I think even though it doesn't necessarily reflect our values, the expectation of a looser regulatory environment to a certain extent makes life easier for the agency, right? I think obviously the new EPA administrator has been confirmed. We understand, I actually don't know whether it's a formal announcement, but there's quite a big press around Mrs. J, recently director. See, I haven't yet, 1, 2, 3 expect to be the news of one officer, but again, I think what we've heard, again, whether it's the right public policy or not, is actually are changes that would make the agency's requirements easier to meet. So there's potential for a rollback to the earlier version of the lead and copper rule. There is likely to be less of a concern about PFAS. Those are the two that come most to mind.
More to come, for sure. I think we will be eager to hear, particularly on the funding, whether it's on the tax exempt bonds or federal funding and grants, right? And how you're planning for those scenarios in the rate study for this fiscal year.
I guess that, kind of shifting a little bit to other business, brings to mind what we can control on our own and how do we make sure that we have the revenues on our own, the enterprise funds to be able to do this. I know I'm early, but every April I start talking about stormwater rates and our ability to levy those, and we do have the sustainable stormwater rate study coming out shortly, and that work continuing by the staff. One question I have where we've had back and forth on our ability to levy a stormwater rate. That I know there's different determinations on whether we have it, whether we don't, what explicit or implicit authority we have. If I can make a request to get a paper, a briefing on that more explicitly, whether or not we can answer that question is open, I guess, but I'd love to understand what the current thinking is. There had been legislation last year at Albany that may have enabled us to do that. Do we need to wait for that or not? And just love to
Yes.
have a briefing on that.
That's the, I think that's the consensus.
I'd love to see that written and understand what's leading to that.
The bill, this has been out there for a while. There's a lot of negotiation that's needs to happen between the city and upstate water systems. I don't know, the assembly person who's sponsored the bill is looking to those like more stuff. Like those are gonna be continuing.
I guess I'd take a step back from the actual bill to the reasons why we may or may not have the legal authority to impose that and just where the statute is to get the determination.
There's no mention of stormwater facilities in the statute. Yeah. Good, as it currently exists. We've fudged around that issue, currently, but with these, follow-up or interrupting at any point, the, extent of the investment that needs to be made, we really want to have real clarity in our statutory authority. There is some legal risk, which I prefer not to go into, but it'll always be better for us to have clear statutory authority to do what we're about to do.
I think, Al, if I, my understanding is, frankly, the law department would not let us if we wanted to. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair. So,
We would not, so we are not able to propose a stormwater rate to the board,
Because of the
given the
legal analysis.
legal opinion of the law department, suggesting that that would be too risky. But is that fair?
yes.
What's the conclusion that we need to state?
Well, if we were going to discuss this further, I would suggest an executive session.
I would love an executive session to discuss this further. That would be very helpful, just to, so that we can make sure that we can,
Yes.
accurately understand it, and particularly if we need the legislation, as I said,
Yeah.
I, as a board member or as an individual citizen, want to aggressively support that work and push for it, as it is critical to us. So that'd be wonderful if we could schedule that.
Okay. And yes, we later schedule that as tonight.
I'll schedule it, schedule it remotely.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll leave it to the
okay.
board to figure out how we do that,
Okay.
the stuff. That'd be wonderful.
Very good.
Any other issues to bring to the board?
Today?
With that, do we need to, I guess we motion to adjourn? All right. I think we're all in favor? All right. No opposed? Thank you guys very much. Appreciate that.